We're going to talk about government contracts must be in the best interest of taxpayers. And this was brought about by an article on Saskatchewan Government not putting to open tender a bid for water bombers, where an alleged competitor found out later and said that they could have provided the same water bombers for $100 million less. That means taxpayers were ripped off in the transaction. Now, there are many, many transactions across all of Canada dealing with government and government contracts that are dubious, to say the least, and it's costing taxpayers money because of non-accountability on these issues. Some of these are very close to fraudulent transactions, in my belief, and that's what we're going to try to discuss a bit. We're not sure where we're going to take this conversation, but it should be interesting. Okay, Cal, what's your take on this Saskatchewan water bombing contract?
Well, I think there's been a mismanagement all the way along. Everybody should have known that Canada needs water bombers to allow the only company that builds them to basically go out of business and stop producing water bombers is a government failure, in my opinion. But it goes deeper than that, of course. For example, there's a story about a grounded water bomber that sat idle while fires burned in northern Saskatchewan. Apparently, people forgot that they had to keep these things up and look after them. It was a multi-million-dollar Conair Dash 8 water tanker, and it's been sitting, hasn't logged any flight time, and is unused, according to one of the local
But wasn't it
MLAs.
the Conair with the company that got the contract where they claimed to have been overpaid $100 million for building 4 new water bombers for Saskatchewan?
I'm not sure how that relates to that, but what I can tell you is that they had the plane on the ground and weren't using it.
Wow.
It's bad
Well,
enough that there's a shortage of these planes, but it's negligence when you have them already and you're not using them.
yeah. Well, in this court application that Collison put against the Saskatchewan government, he makes allegations that there's a government employee sole sourcing the $187 million contract from their past employer. So there's inside connections with an employee to the company that has been issued the contract for 100 million more than claimed that the competitor could have produced the same 4 planes for. So that sure raises interesting concept. If Conair was intentionally grounding a water bomber to look at procuring a contract with insider source, this leads to very dubious questions of what's really going on behind the scenes in Saskatchewan. But this is systemic of all governments across Canada, and I think it boils down to lack of understanding that taxpayer dollars is important, but these politicians are being elected off of the wealthy putting their money up to get special favor once these people are elected. So there's conflict of interest in the government politicians when they're not funded by taxpayers to get elected. They're being elected by the people with the money. And we see contracts like this being dubious, to say the least. And why isn't this contract put out to open tender to get the best options and the best, lowest priced and highest quality value for taxpayer dollar? That would be an interesting question.
Well, I think one of the problems is there aren't many manufacturers of water scooping or fire retardant carrying aircraft to begin with. But in Saskatchewan's case, I guess they have 10 existing air tankers, of which at least 4 were inoperable during the current fire season. And it seems to me that that would be inexcusable since we don't have a fire season for half of the year. It would seem that maintenance and that sort of thing could take place during the non-fire season
Well, that would
winters.
make
But
common sense, wouldn't it?
yes, and the other issue apparently is they do not have trained pilots. So even if they had the equipment, there's no guarantee that the equipment would even be used. So it's just mismanagement from the top to the bottom. Awarding a contract without any kind of call for
Well,
tenders is just additional.
from what I'm seeing of that contract, they could have got 4 additional, maybe 5 additional aircraft bombers for the water bombing had they put it out for open tender. And if they were going to spend 187 million and they overpriced by 100 million, you would have got 4, maybe 5 more water bombers, which means you could have really aggressively attacked fires and saved them from maybe getting out of control as easily. So therein lies a problem, but the daily operation costs are also have to be taken into consideration. If they're overpricing on the purchase of the aircraft, then I'm probably thinking that they're going to be overpaying for the service and upkeep of these aircraft. And that is another issue that may arise in the future on further investigation of this contract.
Well, the competition complains that it's going to cost taxpayers an extra 100 million, but the
Yes.
other side of this is
Well, one's already been delivered in their statement of defense saying, well, we've already had one delivered, now we can't opt out of the contract and there's no remedy before the courts because the contract has already been partially engaged, right? So now they're arguing that before the courts that there's no remedy, so we just pay the money and forget the thing. That was the government's position, apparently.
yeah, and again, the reason why you don't put these out to tender could be that there's only 2 suppliers of these type of aircraft globally. However, having such a slim supply, you would think the government would be more interested in making sure that the manufacturers stayed in business.
These were both Canadian companies operating
Yes,
out of BC, I believe. So why
yes.
wouldn't you look at making it fair and equitable for both companies to maintain strong economic positions through the development of contracts in Canada? And that leads me to another question is a selection like this where you have a person that worked for one of the manufacturers selecting the contract or being able to influence a contract, is that proper conduct of a government? And I say probably not. There seems to be a conflict of interest. And does such a contract jeopardize the financial stability of the competitor? And I say yes, it would significantly drop the ability because you're losing a contract that you could have potentially had to prop up your bottom line. So I see that as a major problem, and that's why we're talking about it, is because this is a systemic problem, not just in Saskatchewan, but across the board in Canadian politics and allocation of contracts. As the audience may be aware, I ran into problems with PNG Exploration Ltd in Saskatchewan, where they were giving preferential treatment to land banking of oil rights, and we ended up suing and really getting nowhere. And I believe the lawsuit's still in place, and we will never see a light of day in that case because it is the same type of preferential treatment to their selected individuals that they want to see profit or have connections to the government. And this is a systemic problem that hurts local business and makes us uncompetitive against some of foreign businesses as well that get their influences into the government coffers. So we could go into more detail on that, but I really want to concentrate on this about the water bombers, because we have the F-35 contract, which was billions of dollars, and we really are not seeing the need for that. And as you point out, it would be better to take some of that money and actually support manufacturing in Canada. And we know that water bombers are a very essential service to Canada. And let's face it, if there's war, water bombers could actually be used to put out fires in different localities as well. So it might be a smarter investment to long-term plan and to prevent such blatant contract abuse and the process of abuse.
Well, the other side of the coin too is the specifications that they put out for these contracts in order to make sure that there is only one acceptable bid.
Yeah,
That
which
was
I
that
read
was
that.
very similar in the oil and gas industry, but in the water bomber issue, they were looking for tails that were less than 30 feet high, and I guess the 737 tail is 37 feet high. They're claiming that it will not fit into the government hangars, which I don't know if that's a
Yeah.
legitimate excuse or
No,
not, because
they could raise the door on the hangar 7 feet, and like the lawsuit said, it would be cheaper to add on the door than it would be paying $100 million extra for a plane. So I think the criteria was specifically manipulated to exclude any competitor open bid, because you could open bid that even with that criteria being spelled out. Instead, it was arbitrarily said you're not going to be able to bid because we don't want your plane, and we're not going to allow you to lower the fin or go out and buy planes that could be retrofitted to meet the criteria of the bid. So
let's even carry that into the oil and gas industry. As you know, when you started to become successful in winning the bids for gas
yes.
leases, they changed the requirements, and
Yeah. Well,
and
it goes to show the corruption. Like, folks, I did what's called lowball bidding. I looked for areas that I knew the big oil companies couldn't be bidding. And listen, folks, I can't get access to money now. I can go buy oil rights now, even though they changed the laws, because it goes to the highest bidder. And I can go get them, but as soon as my name shows up on any bidding, I'm excluded from the bidding. I will not get bids. And the other issue is that it's private collection facilities for your oil. So if I do buy oil rights and I do drill up the rights, these benefactors of this land banking may or may not allow me to put my oil in their facilities to tie into the pipeline. And that's a big concern. So it costs me millions of dollars and the company millions of dollars, and we have little recourse because you, the taxpayers, won't stand up for the interests of Canadian businesses and the interests of Canada. And that really hurts us and many ways. And this is why we're talking about some of these issues, is because we have firsthand experience of being screwed out of millions of dollars and being precluded from contracts because we dared to speak up against this corruption while we were in business. Hindsight's 2020. I made a mistake and opened my mouth while I was in business, and they pushed me and squashed me like a bug on a rug before I could ever have a voice and ever have the ability to fight them. So hence I'm doing a podcast trying to highlight all these other inequities that are hurting other businesses because I've experienced it firsthand. Now, that's fine, but where we have to take this discussion is, do you feel that that's fair, and do you think that government should change its ways? And that's what I sort of wanted a broader discussion on.
good luck.
Yeah, that's about it. I seen another article here out in Ontario where a Catholic school board member was gone after by a minister in the Ford government for overspending for coffee and computers and what have you, and the government demanded him pay back all the thing for sitting on the Catholic school board, where they had their meetings in the Tim Horton and bought the odd milkshake and coffee for those sitting in on the meetings. And the hypocrisy goes to the fact that the minister pays for an office out of taxpayer dollar, has his meeting in the office, and yet he bills for meals and hotels and travel expenses for way, way more than is reasonable, and you're a public servant, right? At what point do we as taxpayers pay for the right for these people to feather their own nest and negotiate for future contracts and voter support on your dime? And that's related to this topic of government contracts, because when the politicians feel it's their right to be paid for meals and meeting and hobnobbing and vote solicitation as part of their job and privilege, we start to see that flow over into government contracts and not having to make it arm's length transactions and in the best interests of taxpayer dollars. One of my pet peeves on government contracts is we need to have governments that understand that small business is the backbone of job creation in the country. And the government knows who the small businesses are. So small businesses and corporations that are set up should be automatically be forwarded any information on contracts that are going to be tendered by the governments for open bid. And the government should be setting up systems of support for these small businesses. And this goes back to understanding that when you're expanding your business and you want to make more jobs and security, you have to take into account that big business has the ability to access funding. So for me to compete against a big business, I have to have the equal access to funds. That I do not have, because it is weighed in favor of big business over small business. Where the government issues these contracts, there should be a government bank system to access the necessary funds for operation to fulfill these contracts as well. And that's something that could be implemented at a government level to help bolster small business, because in this crisis that's coming, it is small business that's going to carry the day, not large, big corporations. They're going to profit take and close down offices, where small business is going to be scrambling, putting their house and home on equity positions to keep employees paid and the local economy stimulated. So these visions have to be implemented by government, and that is not happening.
Well, there are various ways that the government can be corrupt. Obviously, the one way in which they've avoided the obvious in the tanker issue is they offered the bidding through a process that was standard for government contracts, but ridiculous when you look at the fact that there are only two manufacturers.
Yes.
So if you want to hide a bid, you announce the bid, and you announce the offer somewhere where people aren't going to see it, which is what happened in that case.
Why
And
wouldn't they have notified the second manufacturer that we have?
it's a no-brainer.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's a
they didn't
no-brainer.
want it.
But on the scale of corruption, when you mention the school trustees, one
Yes.
thing that is the story behind that is that the Ford government is trying to get rid of the school trustees and take over the school boards directly. So
Yeah.
they're looking for ways to smear trustees in order to justify what they're doing. One maybe bad apple, is going to be the reason why they're going to upset the entire apple cart. And if you look at what Ford has been involved in himself, he had a little birthday party for his daughter, which he invited several well-known land developers. And those
Yeah.
land developers just happened to buy land in the green belt, which surrounds Toronto. And
I
it's a
remember
band
that
of,
corruption, and that
well,
was pretty
let me,
dubious. And
but a lot of people don't understand it. The green belt is an area that has been set aside as basically an ecological reserve. In other words, other development can't take place in what is
right.
already there. So the Ford cronies
Uh-huh.
happen to pick up land, and when you pick it up in the green belt, it's not worthless, but
Crime.
it's devalued because it's in an area that you can restrict development, say $12,000 an acre. Well,
Right.
when it was rezoned and taken out of the green belt, the developers, Rob Ford's friends, stood to earn over $8 billion, which is
Wow.
corruption at the highest level. Now, the provincial government passed the investigation over to the RCMP. So far,
Yeah.
nothing has happened. And they
Yeah,
did an
that's
investigation through the, the ethics commission or whatever. Nothing has happened. So one minister resigned. He took the fall for that. But
right.
everybody else, if anybody else tried to steal $8 billion, well, you go into a
Well,
store and
you,
steal a package of cigarettes, you go to jail. So
yeah, but
it's
I mean,
it's
you got to look at how Canada is modeled very similar to the US, where crime pays. And that's something that we cannot ignore up here in Canada, that we do have the corruption built into the system because we model our legal system and justice system and stock market, which is privately owned business, after the models of the United States. And we're turning a willful eye or a blind eye on this corruption, and it has manifested itself to a really epic proportion down in the United States. And folks, that is going on here too. We just don't want to pay attention to it, and we're willfully ignoring it. And that is not acceptable because it is going to bite us in the ass, and it's going to bite us real hard, and it's starting to bite us in many capacities up here. I mean, we've got the MAGA movement going across Canada. I mean, there was 1,000 people show up at a rally for this idiot that was shot in the U.S., and that was here in Alberta. And believe it, folks, this is happening, and it's part of turning a blind eye to fraud, corruption, lies, and everything. And we cannot, as a culture or society, accept this any longer. We have to change. We have to be the instrument of meaningful change in how we allow corruption and lies and all this graft to occur in our government, and it's costing us, the taxpayers, right out of our pockets. And that's unacceptable, and you should be speaking out a little more and start paying attention more, folks. So what else do we have on this corruption stuff that's at our fingertips here for our audience?
I don't know. Rob Ford says that no one can influence the Fords. No one.
There you go.
So yeah, so $8 billion profit on the table, I guess, was just a happy coincidence.
Can't influence them, but you can buy them.
Yeah.
But okay, well, we got to be fair. Okay, I've got one beef, and I've got one beef with Prime Minister Mark Carney. It was just announced Sunday afternoon that they were launching Build Canada Homes. The government's new agency will oversee federal housing programs. They've allocated $13 billion to the new agency to build 4,000 modular homes. Okay. Modular homes are a pretty reasonable price right now, but when you announce that you're going to build 4,000 and it's all subsidized, I guarantee you the price just went up $50,000 to $100,000 per modular home. And a modular home is built off location and moved onto a site. So one of my beefs is they're backing large business that can go straight to a bank if it's a profitable business model and get all the money they want on loans to do exactly this. So why are we giving taxpayer dollar to this? To up our prices that we're going to pay for a modular home. Carney, I thought you were smarter than this. Obviously you're not. One of the problems in the housing industry, very simply, the banking industry, which you are a part of, Carney, does not recognize raw land as being a legitimate investment for a mortgage or a loan, to buy. And if you have access to raw land, guess what? You can be your own general contractor to build your own home, and it means you're cutting out $100,000 or more profit by a general contractor to build that home for you, because you act as a general contractor and you pay them for their actual labor, not them acting as a middleman to broker the manufacturing as cheap as possible to pocket as much money as possible. So Carney, you missed the ball there. You need to change the Banking Act and make it so that people like me can go buy a raw piece of land, and I guarantee you 6 months to a year later, I've got a house built on it and very happy to live in it. And when you turn a blind eye to these regulations and these inconsistencies in the industry, you are facilitating only the wealthy from taking and owning more of the industry. Where some of the houses in the US, residential houses, there's 40 to 50% of major cities owned by corporations that rent out and lease out their houses. Canada's on that trajectory where we are going to have the majority of houses and apartments and condos all privately owned by businesses leasing to you, so that they eat up all your disposable income and they keep raising the rent in an unproportionate amount to what you're going to get for your wage increase annually. So they're just eating into your pocketbook, and that has to stop. And one of the ways is changing the banking industry around this housing issue that's causing the problem in the first place. So that's another rant from me, but
Well, I can imagine the Corey Lanterman subdivision where we have 1,000 individuals all building their own houses and contracting their own contractors and all applying for all the municipal guidelines and approvals one byproduct of that would be it create a massive amount of employment for municipal workers in approving
oh yeah,
approving
red tape is one of the issues as well. Now, I have applied for development on condos and stuff in my past days, and one of the problems was the red tape and getting money access. Like I tried it. I did, negotiate on lands to buy for condo developments and stuff, and found it just a pain in the ass to deal with red tape and walked away. It's important for people to understand that just because people don't have money doesn't mean they can't bring projects to fruition and go raise capital to raise money to do these jobs. Oh, except for one thing. The stock market has regulations preventing you from even raising capital to do projects. You have to jump through hoops to raise money to do projects, which means it's catering to big business folks. And little guys have a hard time getting through the door because the billionaires control what you can access for funding to do anything.
I think the money that they're talking about allocating would be going to companies that already build modular homes. Like I don't think.
Yeah, but those companies can walk to the bank and say, I've got a sale for a home. Give me money. But they're
no, but that's
they
a
can
good
do that
question.
right now. They can do that right now. There's no need to subsidize them.
And that's a good question. Follow the money. Like why is the subsidy necessary? And what in fact will it actually do? Will it create more housing?
No. They're going to create it already because it's demand. People are looking for the demand. And they're not giving loan guarantees to a home buyer to say, hey, we'll give you a loan guarantee. You go buy it off that contractor. Well, that contractor can run to the bank as soon as you walk in with a legitimate line of credit to build that home or buy that home. Bang, you're done. So why are you giving it to big business versus to the individual that can actually go buy that home? And the banks will give unlimited cash flow to that business to facilitate the contract. They're a big business. They've got proven sales.
Maybe the solution is, and what they've done in the past is offer longer term, lower rate mortgages for people that have lower incomes so that they can qualify.
Well, that's not going to work either because that caused the last bubble burst in 2007. They had zero interest 40-year mortgages and people were getting in debt over their head. What you have to do is realize it's the middlemen inside the industry that are capitalizing on the profit increase on the real estate transactions. The banks make nothing but money, the realtors make nothing but money, and the contractors make nothing but money. So one of the issues was we watched a house get bought for $500,000 roughly. It was demolished. A fourplex went up. The fourplex went up in 60 days or something like that. Real fast construction, real crappy workmanship. I talked to the contractor and they said, oh yeah, we're making $100,000 a unit. So it's a fourplex. They're making $100,000 profit off each unit on that lot. That's $400,000 minimum profit. From the prices that were sold, I say they made about $600,000 off fourplexes sold. and they walked away selling each a brick in a building to some prospective buyers that now are stuck with the home maintenance of a building that was slapped together, and it probably isn't going to last 50 years without lots of maintenance and upkeep. And that is one of the problems too, is the contractor walked out, downloaded all the liabilities of cheap workmanship onto the prospective homeowner, who was oblivious to the fact that, corners were cut to make the maximum profits. And that's one of the conundrums in the industry, is that these contractors make way too much profit off the work they're actually doing, in my opinion. But I could be wrong. Maybe some of them deserve to make $500,000 off one lot putting a fourplex up. Can't see it, but this is where municipalities, provinces, and federal government have to look at what are they actually allowing for business and why they're not taxing these businesses properly to ensure that price gouging isn't going to happen.
Well, here's what the announcement is. Apparently, they're creating a new agency that will supercharge housing construction across Canada by helping to build supportive and transitional housing in collaboration with provinces, territories, and Indigenous communities. It will also expand deeply affordable and community housing and partner with private developers to build homes for the middle class. What does that mean?
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
like supercharge. Okay, great. Collaboration. Yeah. Okay. What does that mean? We're gonna talk to the provinces and the territories.
Well, they're
Transitional.
also
What's
talking CMHC, right, which is designed to provide loan guarantees to the bank on allowing lower income people to, well, not even lower income people that are putting a lower amount deposit on the building, to ensure that the banks don't lose any money. And who gets stuck with the bill? The guy that put the down payment down, that it doesn't meet the 20% requirement, so he puts less than 20% down, 5% down. He's being overcharged by CMHC, who makes profit off of loaning the guarantee to the bank. There's no need for a guarantee to the bank. They got the house, they got the collateral, they got everything. There's been no real major downtrends where houses have dropped 10% in the last, since the 1980s recession. Houses haven't dropped 10% on any given time. So CMHC is ripping people off on this contract, and that needs to be reevaluated. If you really want people to build houses, CMHC needs to be protecting the home buyer, not protecting the bank. And that's something that should have been dealt with at a better level of government. If you're going to want to build 480,000 new homes a year in Canada, you might want to start with getting rid of the corruption that CMHC has built into the system. And we're obviously ignoring that this is not fair to the entry-level home buyer that doesn't have the 20% down to buy a house, when house prices are going up and up and up all the time. So why is CMHC protecting the bankers and the contractors, per se, with a system of ripping off the entry-level home buyer? Because that's all it is they're increasing the cost to the home buyer by quite a bit on their monthly payments, and you really get no benefit from it, because all they're doing is taking the risk away from the rich, wealthy people that are loaning the money to build the house that are making on a 20-year mortgage, they double the money returned over the life of that mortgage. So isn't that enough of a ripoff to the home purchaser? And if you're going to start talking about CMHC funding and protecting the rich, why is it that you can't compete with business? Oh, well, business get a line of credit to buy their house. So the rich get a line of credit to buy the house, where all they have to do is pay the monthly interest rate. They don't have to pay compound interest on interest in advance of paying on your principal. That's a mortgage. And a mortgage is also a ripoff that is instituted by the banks. And the federal government really wants to deal with inequities and get housing products built faster and better and in the benefit of taxpayers, they would outlaw mortgage payments because lines of credit work just as effective, and it's not enriching the wealthy and enriching the banks. So there are ways of correcting the problem, and I suggest that, you know, when you're starting protecting only the wealthy and the banks and the money people, and you're not protecting us, the lowlifes, that pay the taxes, and you're using our tax money to subsidize and enrich the wealthy instead of putting a roof over our heads, there is a fundamental problem, folks. And that's something we're going to try to address on another issue. But please, in the comments, let us know what you think of this stuff, and we'll try to do some rational thought on some of the options. And
Well, I'm back at what the announcement was, right?
right.
It's to help build supportive and transitional housing, so that's housing that nobody else will ever finance.
Right.
So there's no profit to be made in that sector whatsoever, right?
Oh, no, these modular
And
homes are very profitable. You got that, they're
no,
very
no,
profitable.
but they could be profitable to the builder, but they're not going to be profitable to the finance end of the market.
Yeah, it's not
If you,
as profitable to the finance, and it's not profitable to the person buying the modular home, because modular homes don't have the same upward mobility and pricing, right? There's nothing
well,
you can really do
but
to upgrade it.
let's look at it further. They're saying they're going to partner with private developers to build homes for the middle class. Now, when they say partner, does that mean they're going to take a piece of the construction company and they're going to become partners, or does that
Well,
mean they're just going to?
that would make more sense. That if you're going to put taxpayer dollar, you better be a crown corporation where you're seeing a profit from
They
the
don't
investment.
they don't say
So,
that. They just
well,
say partner, whatever that means.
well,
And
partners should share in the profits of what that is generating, and that's another beef that taxpayers should be dealing
and
with,
then
is that they should, if you're investing that kind of money, $13 billion, you better have a business model that sees that profits are coming back from that 13 billion in a model where you're providing a product that is sellable, and not the businesses profiting all the proceeds from the profits
so
they're
that
going to generate.
so that'll be interesting to see where the money goes. But 13 billion of that is earmarked for 4,000 modular homes that
Yeah.
will go into 6 initial sites. So the sites have
Where are
already
those
been,
sites?
well, they're in Ottawa, Edmonton, Winnipeg, Toronto, Longueville, Quebec, and Dartmouth, Nova Scotia. So if you look at where those sites are, they're going to be creating potentially an instant ghetto.
Yeah, well,
You know, who owns the land now, and you know, who's
I
are
think
they
they were
buying it?
talking federal government lands that are already owned, and they're going to redesignate it. So that could be old buildings that the Heritage Trust Fund bought into. I don't know, and they
Yeah,
demolish them and build these sites. But these modular homes, some of these modular homes are also apartment buildings. They build upward with modular homes. So they prefab the homes and they're modular homes, but they're actually, you know, 8, 9 stories high buildings with stacked on stacked modular homes.
they're
And
using containers in some places.
yeah, that's
Yeah.
prefab. It's prefabbed homes shipped in and built. So they're built in one location, which my question is, why wouldn't you just build an apartment complex that's properly constructed on site? So there's some real issues in this, and I find it like a Band-Aid approach to trying to solve it. I mean, if these modular homes are for transition of immigrants, maybe that's what they're using. They don't want to say that, hey, these 4,000 homes are just going to use for the immigrant program, so that the people can't complain that the immigrants are getting better standards of living than anybody else, or forcing the price of houses up. So they're going to cram pack people into these 4,000 homes, which, like you said, now is going to create a ghetto scenario in whatever area that these government lands, federal government lands, are being given up for these modular homes. There's some real issues in this, and I think it goes back to there's still a systemic problem with this Band-Aid approach, and it's not long-term beneficial to us that I can see. I could be wrong, but I think it's just trying to appease the issue of housing shortage because there's too many immigrants coming into the country. And I don't see it solving the problem at all.
Well, one of the issues, of course, would be that you'd have to solve the problem at the root. If the root is the amount of, if the root is the amount of people, not the amount of houses, because at one time, apparently there was plenty of houses, now there's not. And so
Right.
you got to look at that and say, what's the solution? The solution is
Well,
obvious.
well,
But
being an immigration economy, and that's basically why the housing industry is so profitable right now, is because of immigration. If there's no demand for housing, the housing industry collapsed. And in 1979, when the recession started, by 1983, houses in Alberta dropped 40 to 50% in value because of the recession. And that was because the demand dropped. And the immigration wasn't occurring at that level either because there was no jobs to come to. So one of the reasons Alberta is a destination and housing problem is Smith said, we'll pay people to come here that have trades. Well, they come here and they don't find any work, and part of the stipulation was they had to work a year in their trade, so they can't get a year's work in their trade, so they didn't get the bonus from the Alberta government. And now we got record unemployment in Alberta, which is some of the highest in the country, and that also pushed up the housing market, as well as immigrants from Ukraine war. We had, I think there was 80,000 or something, I don't know how many, come to Alberta, that also pushed up the housing demand. But those factors are still part of a housing boom that would otherwise have not been. And any recession coming up, you can see houses going to be the first to be hit, and that's because they're going to stop having immigrant population come in at a large enough volume to substantiate the industry going up, up, up. And when there's no jobs, the ability to pay goes down, 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 and all these business models that are renting out these residential properties for profits and huge profits and return on their investments, that's going to take a big toll. And it's like a snowball effect. Once it starts, it's going to tumble really fast, and we could easily see the housing industry hit a 50% reduction, just like it did in the 1980 recession. And if you look at all the economics coming out of the U.S. and what's happening down there, their prices are dropping and they're having problems across the board, and inflation is starting to hit them. That's going to trickle up here, and we're going to see some major impacts. So beware, people, that what happens in the U.S. is going to facilitate even further falls in Canada. And one of the big targets is going to be this real estate bubble. It's going to blow one day, and that's going to hurt a lot because we are a service economy. So,
just to give some numbers to that, the mortgage delinquency rate in Toronto is the highest level in decades.
oh,
The first quarter of 2025, the delinquency rate climbed to 0.22%, which is a 10% increase over the previous year. The rate represents a 58% rise compared to the same season last year. So
yeah.
what you're seeing now is more and more people aren't making their regular mortgage payments, which is a sign that the market is starting to turn. And of course, the Toronto market is the biggest market. Obviously, the GTA is the biggest market in Canada and the most important one as far as the banks are concerned. If there's a slide starting there, it's going to be starting everywhere.
Well, you can see it everywhere. I mean, you see it in the entertainment industry. There's less and less people going out, and they're not spending as much. So you see it here in Calgary and different places in Alberta. The entertainment budgets aren't there. It's because there's been a capitalist movement to tap into every aspect of your livelihood, and the governments are the same. They're always going up in price. Your taxes are going up. Your costs of taxpayer delivered services are going up, and that's hurting the bottom line. And the wages are not keeping up with the inflationary pressures of price increases, and that's really hurting a lot of people. I mean, it's got to change. It's going to change. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. There's a recession coming, folks, or major changes are going to happen. we're not a war economy where we can start manufacturing missiles and planes and jets to service Ukraine or wars around the world. So where's the income's going to come from when the real estate sector has its market adjustments? And that's right now is the service industry in Canada, and that's where the majority of the jobs are coming from my perspective. So I see we got to plan ahead, think smart, and hopefully Carney starts doing better programs. But to be fair, we wanted to show that Carney might have slept on this one housing initiative, and I could be wrong. Been wrong before. Anything else you want to cover in this, Cal?
No,
Okay, folks.
we
Give us
beat
your
this one to
comments. Give us your comments and any other topics you'd like us to discuss. And if you have inside information that you want us to do a story on, please contact us. We want to start bringing on guests as well to discuss some of these issues that they have in mind, and we'll see where that leads. Okay, thank you for your time. Bye.
Bye.
Subscribe to the channel, give us a like, and please share the video. Don't be afraid to share this commercial with your friends too.